Trump shifts stance on NVIDIA chip ban. Do you remember Windows 11 recall? It's back. And Solo IO adds an MCP gateway to its API platform. Intel is selling off 51% of their Altera chip business, and it's going to Silver Lake Partners. And we will, of course, look at embracing physical AI from Intel Vision 2025. All this and the greatest of news today on the Tech Field Day Rundown. Welcome to the Tech Field Day Rundown, where each time we meet, we run down the IT news of the week with a variable degree of snarkiness. I'm your host, Alistair Cook, and joining me on what is National Eggs Benedict Day is my good friend, Mr. Ron Westfall. Welcome to the show, Ron. Are you ready for that great sinking feeling day?
I'm fired up, Alistair. It's great to be here. And I think we'd be neglectful not to mention what happened on the eve of this day. And that was in 1874, the first Impressionistic exhibition opened in Paris, featuring outstanding artists such as Claude Monet, Edgar Degas, Pierre-Auguste Renoir, Camille Pissarro, and Keith Richards. So I'm just excited to, be here and also comment on, that great sinking feeling day, which is when the Titanic sunk. And it happens to coincide when U.S. folks need to file their taxes. So, is that coincidence? What do you think?
Well, I think that great sinking feeling would absolutely fit. And being based in New Zealand, I try very hard not to need to file US federal taxes, and so far I've succeeded, because I hear that it is quite the trial.
Fair enough. Yeah, I imagine it's different in other parts of the world, but it can be a trial for many of us in the U.S.
Indeed. Speaking of trials, the Trump administration has paused plans to restrict NVIDIA's export of H20 AI chips to China. This decision followed a Mar-a-Lago dinner attended by the NVIDIA CEO, Jensen Huang. It's a great place to make businesses at Mar-a-Lago. After which the company pledged more AI infrastructure investment in the US. So despite bipartisan concerns about national security, Chinese firms like ByteDance and Alibaba have already placed large orders for the H20 chip, which remains the most advanced AI processor currently allowed for sale in China. This change on restrictions, this move to allow more business to happen in China, and particularly AI in China, Ron, is this a sign of changes in the water, or is this a simple commercial deal?
Wow, that's, I think, a great way to start off. Imagine that, NVIDIA, AI. Yeah, it's still filling up the headlines, and it's been over 2.5 years since it's really, captured the attention of the entire ecosystem. And I say it's a big deal. And accompanying the announcement is the fact that NVIDIA plans to shore up to $500 billion in the development of its chips and AI infrastructure. So this was a big wig dinner for sure. And what I think is going to make a difference here is that the Trump administration has agreed to, expedite and quickly deliver all the necessary permits to NVIDIA to make this happen. And I think a bit of background would be helpful here. In particular, Blackwell production is taking place at TSMC's facilities in Arizona. So that's already 1 foot in the ground. And so that, I think, is clearly going to indicate that this really has momentum and that this is something that's real, including, I would say, the objective of creating up to hundreds of thousands of jobs. And I'll come back to that in a moment. But what I think is also important here is that AI supercomputers will be built in Texas through partnerships with Foxconn and Wistron. And we're looking at roughly a 1 million square feet of manufacturing space that NVIDIA is building out. And so that is going to enable mass production of supercomputers in the next year or so. Also, over the next few years, they are planning to ramp up that half a trillion mark with testing and packaging coming from SPIL or SPIL and Amkor technology. Now, it's clear that I think that the company sees a world where diversity of supply chain and manufacturing is really critical for resilience and fulfilling the needs of its customers. Now, NVIDIA is hardly unique in this regard, but they really are, putting this into action and really demonstrating it with, these remarkable figures. Also of note, NVIDIA and AMD are ready to begin production of their most advanced chips at TSMC's plant in Arizona. So it's not just NVIDIA, it's also AMD getting into the game. And from my view, this is a significant milestone in de risking the single point of failure that is TSMC's advanced node manufacturing in Taiwan. And this definitely deserves a spotlight because it's not even so much the fact that, okay, mainland China could invade Taiwan. It could simply blockade Taiwan and have these same massive risks built into the supply chain. Also, natural disasters, as Taiwan is in the Pacific Rim. It could be earthquake, it could be hurricanes, and not that Texas is completely free of that, but northern Texas and Arizona certainly are safer in those regards, and there's certainly no blockade issues. And so what this is building to is that, the critical self-sufficiency gaps are getting into place for a completely regionalized US semiconductor supply chain. And basically the key elements are coming into place by onshoring. And so for all the noise that's surrounding this, I would say the Trump administration's actions will accelerate the deglobalization trend. And this is something that's not unique to the US, but again, it's being acted on. And for more evidence, we're seeing that South Korea is putting another $23 billion into its semiconductor industry for basically achieving the same ends. And I would say, concluding note, what I think is also curious here about the half trillion figure is the same amount as the heavily promoted Stargate project that was promoted heavily again at the beginning of this year in January with the initial group of funders, including SoftBank, OpenAI, Oracle, and MGX, as well as again NVIDIA and ARM playing a hand as technology partners. And so there's the beginning of the build out of data centers in North Texas with that. But what they both have in common, in addition to the half trillion figure, is that details are a bit scant. I mean, we're seeing, the basic details, the framework, but again, it's going to be about filling in more information, executing and so forth to really make this happen and thus, take off and transform really the global semiconductor supply chain. Now, on a different note, remember Windows 11 Recall? Does anybody recall it? Well, it's back. And Windows Recall is really the ultimate user activity because it records tools released with Copilot plus PCs back in May of 2024, a year ago now, and withdrawn a few months later. So, what Microsoft uses recall activity to do is record comprehensive search, for example, when you cannot remember the website that you're at or read a report or which Slack channel, which I think would be very useful, someone asks you to do something on. Basically, what caused the shutdown is that many users were concerned about the amount of data that was being collected and about how Recall was storing potentially confidential information. Now, Recall is coming back as Microsoft really made it more acceptable. Alistair, from your perspective, this comeback sequel of Windows 11 Recall a real deal?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting thing that a lot of the coverage has been that this really was not something users wanted to have, and that they're not very keen to see it come back. The coverage we've seen, and I particularly picked this up on Ars Technica, they they don't expect people to want this again. One of the challenges in this is that Windows Recall is looking at everything that's going on the screen and doing AI analysis to identify if there's an image on screen, what's in that image, doing text recognition within images. And so there seems to be very little opportunity to tell Recall not to capture some piece of information. So particularly personally identifiable information, health information, security information. We might previously have been relatively safe if we emailed somebody a screenshot of some information because the image that was attached to the email wasn't actually being indexed successfully. what recall does is it will actually index the contents of that image. So if you're sending maybe a screenshot of a report from your doctor to your partner, and your partner is using a Copilot Plus PC with recall enabled, that information is actually fully being ingested into recall, leading to a question then of how is this data being stored and secured? And that's a kind of a sticky element here of there was no awareness and recall that some of the information is more privileged than other information. The difficulty with recall was that even opening an object, opening a file from a file share, recall would capture what was being shown inside that file with no awareness that there might be security constraints or compliance constraints around the data that's being shown. So there are some serious concerns about how recall is holding this information. I can see huge benefit, and I particularly like the idea that Recall could tell me which Slack channel I had received a message in because, like many people, Ron and I have hundreds of Slack channels across multiple Slack servers to try and track, and working out who said what to you where can be a real challenge. So I can see why Microsoft wants this. Now, it is coming back in the Windows Insider channel first. So it is an opt-in, and in the insider channel, it's not in the main channel yet. And it's unclear whether it's going to remain as an opt-in to have all of your data harvested by Windows Recall. And we do have some concerns about where that data's landing up, where the AI insights are landing up from it, and quite a few questions still to be answered there. KubeCon and Cloud Native Con in Europe 2025 were a couple of weeks ago now, but Solo.io added support for the MCP, the Model Context Protocol, to its open source K Gateway. Uh, this helps connect AI platforms more easily. They also donated K Gateway to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation to boost the community use and collaboration. Ron, MCP seems to be one of the new hot things about connecting AI tools and particularly connecting them into the Kubernetes clusters they're deployed onto. This seems really good.
I agree, Alistair. It's a hot topic. And I think a bit of background will be helpful here because MCP originally was developed by Anthropic, as you noted, and it provides what I think is a universal protocol for linking large language models and AI agents to external systems. And I think this is going to be successful because by embedding MCP support in K Gateway, Solo enables AI platforms to use a consistent, really a standardized method for access tools. And this reduces the need for custom integration for each tool and service. And well, quite simply, you can understand the benefits right away. It's intuitive and built in. Now, the K Gateway is built on Kubernetes and Envoy proxy, and it's designed for cloud native applications. So, alrighty, you can see why it will be so appealing to, well, developers and anybody who has to really, rely on Kubernetes to get their jobs done. And I think it's also important to note here that Solo's MCP support can allow AI platforms to scale more efficiently, as well as handle, the growing AI workloads and traffic to, the large language model providers while maintaining performance and security. So that's, I think, all important. All these things have to come together. It's not just a scaling challenge, it's also a performance challenge and an all important security challenge. And I think by using K Gateway's MCP gateway, AI platforms can connect to a broader ecosystem of tools and make it easier to build context-aware, interoperable AI applications without the burden of managing complex integrations. So what I think is happening is that MCP, model context protocol is trending as a magic sauce of sorts that is key to transforming how enterprise developers and AI engineers can better use the AI ecosystem. As such, Solo support here helps move the needle. And we're seeing folks out there like selectors John Capobianco really just raving about how great MCP is and just making, not only his job easier, but also the customers out there, the partners out there, anybody who just wants to make using AI a great deal simpler and streamlined in their everyday tasks. Now, also, I think what's interesting out there is what's going on the server side. And what we saw is that Dell has launched new PowerEdge servers powered by Intel Xeon 6 chips, which are offering better performance and energy efficiency over previous models. Now, the servers are built to support flexible application development, and Dell also improves storage, data protection, and management tools. Now, Dell's new PowerEdge servers, specifically the R470, the R570, R670, and R770 models, say that 5 times real quick, all leverage, again, those Intel Xeon 6 processors with both P cores and E cores. And that's important to deliver these improvements that are noted, particularly, for example, in AI data center environments. And I think one example is that the servers are designed not only for these diverse tasks that are going on in the AI data centers, but also scale out databases with the R8770 specifically achieving up to 80% space savings per 42 unit rack by consolidating legacy platforms. So I think that's something that's going to catch the eye of some decision makers out there. And Alistair, from your viewpoint, what is going on with these new Dell PowerEdge server capabilities? How much is it a big deal?
Well, these, particularly the R470 through 770, are the 1 and 2U single and double socket servers. So these are the commodity mm, servers that are deployed in large numbers in data centers to be the primary compute platform for a lot of organizations. Historically, that would, of course, always have been their vSphere clusters that are then running all of their applications. And although these are not the most high density servers with the most GPUs you can load up in them, right? These 1 and 2U chassis don't take a lot of GPUs. What we are seeing is that the inference stage of the use of AI often doesn't need GPU or doesn't need very much GPU. And so even though these you might look at as these are CPU and network heavy and not necessarily great for GPU, they can be a very cost-effective way to run the inference stage of, and let's be clear, the inference is where you're getting business value out of using AI. All of the training stuff is the necessary pre-work to be able to do the inference, and it's the inference that you're going to do at the largest scale over time. So having nice high-density servers that are going to be cost effective to deliver a large amount of compute is a really vital thing here. I like seeing that there are more cores per processor available. It's the general march that we have seen over time. And I like that this is oriented towards this combination of doing virtual machines, bare metal compute where it suits, containers on bare metal or virtual machines where it suits. I think also that Dell has updated Object Scale along the way. And so Object Scale provides a storage platform that integrates really nicely into a Kubernetes cluster. And the newer release of Object Scale has gone much higher density on the actual SSDs, up to 122 terabytes for a single SSD, means that even though these aren't necessarily huge physical systems, there's a huge amount of storage in them. That is, to me, it's a clear line towards the use of that large amount of storage and high performance storage for AI use cases where that speed of retrieval of data, particularly for tools like using retrieval augmented generation, you've got large corpus of private data that you're using during the inference stage. So Object Scale looks to be doing some great things at increasing the amount of volume, the amount of data, up to 6 petabytes of data in a single 2U node configuration. Naturally, you want to scale out to more than just one node for that. So, yeah, nice to see that continuing innovation, that expansion in capacity in high density servers, particularly because we're seeing data centers filling up again. Right? There was a phase when things emptied out in the data center, when virtualization saved us and we didn't need quite so much data center space. And yeah, progressively we've seen now there's an expansion in demand for space and an expansion in demand for power, which can be quite challenging. Of course, Dell also brought in a new version of their open managed software, supporting newer versions of their iDRAC. So the iDRAC 10 is the latest version. And I'm getting old when I remember the versions of iDRAC I worked with many, many years ago, and PERC 13 RAID controllers. Yeah, lots of new technologies coming in these newer servers, seeing reductions in write latency, seeing improvements in the proactive support, letting us know beforehand if things are going to fail, scaling to ridiculous amounts of storage in all flash configurations using things like Dell Power Protect for on-site data protection. So seeing really good continuation of that spectrum of more power, more storage, at least more compute power, hopefully not an equivalent increase in the electrical power requirement. And that, again, is what we see with the innovations in CPUs along the way. So awesome stuff from Dell, lots of new products released out, and continuing to see more use cases for them. Google Cloud.next, Google's big conference, was last week. And they introduced a bunch of tools and technologies to make AI adoption easier. That might be a bit of a theme today, is making AI adoption easier and more efficient. Highlights include Google's agent-to-agent protocol for secure collaboration between AI agents. It's not just machine-to-machine communication, it's actually AI agents interacting with other AI agents. And new cloud tools to better manage these applications and services. Google also unveiled Ironwood, a powerful new AI chip, reinforcing its focus on leading AI infrastructure and AI tooling. Ron, you have spent quite a bit of time looking at Google's announcements and Google's AI. What strikes you as the best parts of this?
Yeah, great lead in, Alistair. And I think, yes, it's certainly been spotlighted, what's been coming out of Google Cloud Next. But also, I think Google Cloud overall has been building a lot of momentum over the last few quarters. And that's why these announcements are, I think, sharp. Differentiators for Google. And I'll start with the A to A agents. First of all, what they are going to enable is that AI agents, whether they're built by Google or Salesforce, SAP, others, what it's going to happen is that they could communicate securely using a common protocol based on HTTP, JSON, RPC, or SSE. So what this is enabling is the reduction and need again for custom integration. And so I think this is something that in this context, in this area, is moving toward just that, having more standardization and less customization, which could be a bit confusing because in other areas, more customization is in demand. But for this particular announcement, this I think is a outstanding feature that will flow. And it's also allowing agents to share data and coordinate actions. For example, a client agent can discover remote agents' capabilities through JSON-based agent cards and assign tasks such as processing a customer query or scheduling logistics, etc. So you can see, some of the baseline appeal here already. Moreover, it's backed by over 50 partners, including Atlassian, Cohere, MongoDB, as well as Deloitte and Accenture. So you really have a who's who of major players that can really make the A to A agents, matter in terms of what's going on with, the Google customers out there. And as a result, it's again signaling strong industry buy-in. And from my view, then, this coalition suggests a move towards standardized AI agents and AI agent ecosystems. And again, reducing the fragmentation that's out there. And also, while A to A focuses on enabling communication between AI agents, model context protocol, which we touched on, is facilitating connection between agents and external tools or data sources. And so, what I am hearing is that they both together can, create a robust framework for multi-agent systems by addressing different layers of the interactions. And this can again be underpinned by the Ironwood chipset that was also unleashed at the event. And I think that's important because we're seeing the Yeah, again, that's the hyperscalers are committed to building their own silicon. This is again trending toward more customization to, again, support their specific cloud workload demands. That is really primarily related to AI. And so I think that's something that is just reinforcing that trend and is again making the competitive mix out there more interesting, and it will make I would say more challenging for some of the merchants out there to compete more directly against it. And then we're seeing players like SoftBank already hedging for that particular outcome. And so this is something that I think is going to maintain a good deal of momentum for Google Cloud, because my comment and to round this out about Google Cloud having a lot of momentum, I'm seeing organizations, enterprises out there adopting Google Cloud from a previous platform because of Google Cloud's excellence in areas such as resilience. That is, when you have virtual machine reboots, they're going to have to happen on occasion, rather than having them happen frequently and with little to no pre announcement, that upsets customers. What Google Cloud is doing is not only are they reducing those types of scenarios, but also proactively letting them know, hey, yes, a virtual machine reboots are going to have to happen, but just to let you know so you can plan around it. And this is something that, should only take X amount of time. That's a real difference maker, something as simple as that, or seemingly simple, but it's not really simple because it's not obviously being implemented across the entire cloud ecosystem. And the other important factor is security. And of course, cloud security is always important. It's not so much the native security of the hyperscaler, i.e., Google Cloud, but it's also ensuring security of third parties and partners that are using the Google Cloud platform. And that has obviously created some situations that are unfortunate for other scenarios out there. But Google Cloud, I think, is doing a good job of directly addressing that, and as a result, creating competitive advantages. And speaking of what's going on that can impact, data centers, we saw that Intel and Altera are basically parting ways. Intel has agreed to sell a 51% stake in its Altera programmable chip division to private equity firm Silver Lake, and that's valuing the business at $8.75 billion. And as an outcome, Intel will retain 49% share, and the deal is expected to close in the second half of 25. Now, this move is part of CEO Lip Butan's strategy to streamline operations and strengthen Intel's financial position. And I think what is also important here is that Raghib Hussain from Marvell will take over as Altera's new CEO on May 5th, succeeding Sandra Rivera. Now, I think a couple important points is that the deal values Altera at just $8.75 billion compared to this nearly $17 billion Intel paid in 2015, basically a decade ago. But the sale, I think, will provide the company much needed cash after hefty bets on contract manufacturing previously did not really pan out, and as a result, strained Intel's finances. And what I think is also important to note here is that, this is the center of Tan's strategy to streamline Intel after, the attempts to diversify did not really happen beyond, Intel's mainstay PC and server chip businesses, AI being the prime example. But I think it's also indicative that while Intel's struggling to gain a foothold in the AI industry that is dominated by NVIDIA, that what we're seeing is, again, Intel making these important steps to really sharpen its focus, let, Tan take care of, more of the financial side, and, the product teams really drill down on making innovation happen. So again, I think it's an upbeat note that Raghib Hussain is taking over as CEO of Altera, because after 25-year journey at Cavium and Marvell, which he co-founded, with Saeed Ali, Cavium in 2000, and he proceeded to build Cavium from scratch to about a $1 billion annual revenue company and over a $6 billion market cap at its exit. And that included a successful IPO in 2007, culminating with its acquisition by Marvell in 2018. So in a nutshell, I think Altera will be in very good hands moving forward. And Alistair, from your perspective, what do you think is important about, Intel selling, 51% of its share in Altera? What are your expectations?
Well, there'd been some discussion about Intel completely selling off the Altera business. And that seems to have been a plan a little while ago, but Lip-Bu seems to want to hold on to it. And I can understand that. Having a part of your platform where these field programmable gate arrays are available. This is a piece of physical hardware chip that can be reprogrammed to function differently based on the firmware that you load onto it. So unlike a normal CPU where the instruction set is fixed when it comes out of the foundry, the field programmable gate array can be rewritten for a different task, even to the extent that you can offload tasks onto the field programmable gateway, the FPGA, such as accelerating databases. So this capability very much complements the use of high-performance CPUs as we get from Intel. And so not completely handing over Altera, holding just the largest minority stakeholding you can have, is a good move to keep access to that technology. But as you say, Intel needs to recover some finances to focus on the core things that has made Intel great, and handing over, or getting back roughly half of that $8.75 billion, that's going to be very beneficial as funding further development in the things that Intel specializes in. And I think we will see plenty more focus from Lip-Bu to do things in a different way and to get Intel back on its feet. And that brings us to a closer look. Did want to look a little more at what Lip-Bu emphasized at the Intel Vision conference. Uh, a move towards a customer-centric strategy focusing on advancements in AI PCs. With Gaudi 3 accelerators and a new process node for higher density. He introduced the idea also of physical AI, highlighting Intel's commitment to integrating AI into hardware solutions across various selectors. Tan's leadership aims to position Intel at the forefront of AI-driven innovation by enhancing its portfolio and foundry capabilities. What we see is these physical AI is talking about what I'd think of as embedded AI, AI inside physical things, whether it's your car, whether it is your fridge, whether it is a manufacturing plant. But instead of having AI purely in data centers and particularly cloud data centers, actually having the AI happening inside physical devices. Now, we saw this progression with predictive AI in the past. Elements like cameras that get recognition built into the physical camera rather than relying on a server somewhere to do object recognition. And that's a very important part of what we see with things like fraud detection, physical fraud detection in supermarkets. This intelligence built into the camera is what we mean by physical AI here. So, Ron, you've written about this for the Futurum Group. Can you give us a little more insight about what you saw from Intel Vision 2025?
Yes, thank you, Alistair. And it was an honor to be able to attend Intellivision because really it was Lip-Bu Tan's public debut as CEO. He'd only been on the job for 2 weeks, and he, I believe, was very poignant in explaining why take on this massive task. You've been so successful throughout your career. You could be selling this seven C's and sipping Singapore slings for all you want, and yet here he is again looking at really something that is an immense challenge, and that is getting Intel back on its feet. And his core response is that he knew he could do something. He just couldn't stand by and just, let Intel continue spinning its wheel. And so he's going to find out what it's going to take to really make Intel, a successful company again, really a more formidable competitor. And we touched on this throughout our conversation here. Certainly NVIDIA looms, but it's also about AMD. It's also about ARM. It's also about more customized chips. You get it. There's just a really really a huge array of challenges out there that Intel is taking on. And so, while he talked about really, all the core areas of AI, including agentic AI and certainly generative AI. Physical AI was, part of that tripod, I guess you can say, of the major AI areas that Intel can look at. And so, what I think is interesting here is that during the event, he invoked, I would say, robotics on at least a couple occasions. This is my guesstimate, but I think it's indicative that, okay, the thinking is the physical AI is really the new kid on the block here when it comes to AI areas. Yes, NVIDIA has done some heavy marketing here. And yes, world foundational models are something that I think Intel should definitely play a role in. But then it's translating that and productizing it into really silicon and software. Again, he's emphasizing software as a major part of their strategy to, again, deliver competitive advantages quite simply to customers. And because physical AI, again, is nascent, I believe it's an area where Intel can really make its mark all the more effectively and say the areas where they haven't quite really made a mark, Gen AI coming to mind. I mean, yes, they're part of the ecosystem. Yes, Gaudi 3 accelerators and, Xeon CPU fabrics and so forth can make a difference when it comes to, some enterprise training and inferencing. But I think it's going to really to capture the imagination of, investors out there and the overall ecosystem. I would say a major play in physical AI can be one key way of doing it. So, if anything else, he was consistent about emphasizing AI's transformative potential across industries. And it's again being able to leverage the advanced computing power and infrastructure along with software that Intel can deliver. And so I think what is going to happen is that Intel is really not starting from scratch, and that they possess, the key portfolio building blocks to pull this off. And I touched on these AI accelerators, edge computing expertise, and really a tradition of powering complex systems to become an integral player in the physical AI market during its earliest stages. And I think, yes, I touched on robotics, but other key use cases invokes a couple of them, Alistair. Certainly, video capabilities and warehouses and so on. I mean, there's just a litany of different use cases that could be capitalized on here. But it's really about Intel prioritizing this potentially and really getting the ecosystem collaboration that's going to be essential for this. And so that was something that I thought was a couple of major takeaways from Intel Vision. It's, Lip Tan setting the tone and, really saying all the right things in his first 2 weeks at the helm, but also, some hint suggestions that I think, from my view, can definitely lead Intel to a more successful path. And so that, in a nutshell, is, what I thought was valuable about being able to join Intel Vision this year.
I think it's this physical AI is definitely, as you say, it's a nascent area. It's an area where there is not a dominant player that owns the market, and that you have such an uphill battle against. As Intel has struggled with their uphill battle against NVIDIA in the GPU market. So I mean, Gaudi is an accelerator. We've through the labs team here at Futurum, we've done quite a lot of work around seeing how actually effective the Gaudi accelerators are, and yet they're not a headline. They're not a household name the way NVIDIA is for AI accelerators. So claiming the end space. The other thing to bear in mind is this end space, the physical AI, is all about inference. This is where the value is being delivered. This is the low risk place to deploy out these new pieces of infrastructure, because this is directly giving you business value. The more foundational stuff, building foundational models, you're building it and hoping they'll come. There's a significantly higher risk as you're building out that earlier stage in it. So I think there's some really good things to be seen here, and I think it was a very fast movement for Lip-Bu He clearly had plans about how this Intel could be brought forward in a different way than it has for the last few years, and clearly he made this visible to the board, and has then started straight away to get the message out and to start to execute on that.
Yeah, I think physical AI is the next frontier for, the next major set of breakthroughs of innovation because we've been witness to the personal computer revolution. Bring the data to you. You don't have to use an IBM mainframe to do all this compute processing. Again, smartphones, bringing the telecommunications to you. You don't have to use an AT&T dial tone phone to communicate, etc. I think we all understand that and have been fortunate to witness this. And I think, yes, this is the next new brave new frontier amongst others. But again, it's about robotics. And I think robotics will increasingly become important, not just in manufacturing, but also in, say, households, getting beyond, basic vacuuming capabilities to, capabilities that could clean a pool or clean a house. You get the whole idea. These are things that are, I think, increasingly just around the corner. So, good news for everybody. And yes, I think that was an extremely good point you touched on, Alistair. It's about the edge. This is where Intel, I think, has very formidable assets in terms of reducing latency, being able to optimize inferencing and other AI capabilities. And this is not a game of okay, having these GPU clusters, heavy lifting, doing AI training in massive data centers. That's important. That'll continue. But I think what is evolving here again is about what's going on in the field, and this is where I think Intel can make a dramatic difference because it's not just a new field, but it's a new set of requirements and so forth. So stay tuned.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our rundown of the news of this week. Of course, we're looking forward to future weeks. Next week, of course, we will have another rundown, but I won't be there because I'm going to be extremely busy. So, April 22nd to 25th is AI Infrastructure Field Day. And then, Ron, you're joining a Tech Field Day event at the beginning of May. I believe you're joining us for Mobility Field Day.
Right on. Definitely looking for it. Mobility Day 13. And it also has a huge lineup. I don't want to leave anybody out, but it's a who's who of certainly wireless players. So I think we're going to get some excellent scoops and takeaways on what's going on, with not just Wi Fi, but also 5G and the overall mobility space.
And of course, Tom Hollingsworth will be the event lead there, and you can catch all of that action on May 7th and 8th. And as Ron says, that's going to be a big event too. And Tom doesn't escape without another event also in May. Security Field Day will be May 29th to 30th as well. A really big couple of months with great events. So thanks for watching the Tech Field Day Rundown. You can catch new episodes every Wednesday as a YouTube video or on your favorite podcast application. The Rundown's streamed on TechStrong TV, and you can often catch us on other TechStrong and Futurum Group platforms. We'll be back next Wednesday to talk about the IT news in the week that was. Until then, for myself, for Ron Westfall, and for all of us here at Tech Field Day, here's wishing you and yours a beautiful day.